Eric Schwabington by T.S. Shea. Narrated by Worm. Chapter 1. I don't read the terms and conditions. Alright, here's the deal. If anyone asks you if you know Eric Schwabington, the answer is no. Absolutely not. Actually, that might be a little too obvious. Maybe try one of the following. Who? What kind of name is that? Or my personal favorite. Are you threatening me with a stick? I know. Hard name to remember, even harder name to forget. Really doesn't roll off the tongue. That's the blessing and the curse of who I am, though. And this might sound a little selfish, but I promise it's true. The future of the universe depends on keeping that a secret. At least for now. So let's back up a bit. Back before Ganderstorm. Back before Logeets. Back before Schwabington. To where this story really begins. Portland, Maine. July 27th, 2110. The day my life and the fate of the universe changed forever. Back then, I was just Eric Schwabington, a 12-year-old kid with a habit of finding myself in, let's just say, unfortunate circumstances. I didn't have any parents. I'd always assumed the worst, that they were either dead, didn't care about their long-lost son, or both. Instead, I found myself a ward of the state, spending most of my life hopping around the Northeast from one orphanage to the next until I was sent away again because they couldn't handle me anymore. It was never my fault. In Worcester, the boys' room flooded after David Harborough broke open a pipe to get back at Braden Williams. Just because I caught the wrench from hitting Braden right before, Mr. Reed walked in. And obviously he got the wrong idea. It didn't help that I somehow managed to be the only dry kid in the room. Then there was Augusta, where my bunk was stuck between a pyromaniac and an entomologist. Fancy words for guy who likes fire and guy who likes bugs a bit too much. It's usually the accent that rubs people the wrong way. I don't really have one, at least not the way other people in the Northeast do. And for whatever reason, Bug Boy decided that day was the perfect day to slip a few cockroaches under my pillow. I don't know if he just lost his sense of direction or what, but the cockroaches ended up 2 beds down instead of mine. And when the lighter fluid found his space crawling with the creepers, he went berserk and blamed me. Another long story short, the boys' ranch burned to the ground. And thanks to my loving neighbors, I somehow ended up with the blame. When they sent me to Burlington, I thought I was done for. The people of Vermont were always a little too nice for my liking. Apparently my sarcasm didn't really rub off the right way. And once a book went missing from my dorm there, a family photo album no less, it was yet again Eric who took the fingers. As if stealing someone's precious memories had ever even crossed my mind. In fact, I don't think I ever stole anything until I met Chauncey. See, after they finally sent me to Portland, I knew it was only a matter of time before something else happened. And given my new roommate selection, I decided it was time to take a chance on myself. Thankfully, one of the other kids had the same idea. Chauncey was a few years older than me, with a, let's just say, less defined backstory. He was never one to talk much, but from what I had gathered at the orphanage, and the way he knew his way around the law, he'd been in and out of the system several times, with at least one stint in the slammer. But thanks to him and everything he knew, we carved out a decent gig for ourselves right in the heart of town. We were going on 2 years together, nested out in a self-made man cave buried below one of the hotels near the harbor. It was a tight fit, but the old service closet hadn't been used in years, maybe decades, and so long as we had enough space between ourselves, we could fit everything we needed in our little room. Well, except the bathroom down the street at the old seafood joint. Whatever we needed, we took. Looking back, I suppose it was stealing, but Chauncey always labeled it necessary provisioning. In other words, if we needed something more than someone else, there was always a good reason to get it. Electronics were the easiest. You'd be shocked how many people don't notice when they leave things behind in restaurants or bathrooms. Then there were clothes, which we usually took right from the source. It's amazing how many different souvenir stands can sell the exact same tourist merchandise. Anyways, my story really starts on that calm July night. Chauncey was out for the night. I never knew exactly what it meant, but given the time of year and a smudge of pink I noticed on one of his shirts the week before, he had a date. As happy as I was for the guy, the idea of him abandoning me to see someone new did make me a little uneasy, like I was starting to lose the only permanent thing I'd ever really had in my life. That sentence isn't going to age well. It all started when my charger decided to fry itself. I've been sitting for hours playing this really old video game you've probably never heard of. Minecraft. Just trying to kill time until I was too tired to continue. When my phone finally knocked itself out and nothing was working to revive it, I decided to take my talents to the nearest convenience stand and merge paths with a new one. Now, I'm not going to explain how Chauncey and I managed to get away with taking what we want. That would be irresponsible. And the last thing I would want is for you to copy me and then get yourself caught and have you blame Eric Schwabington for all your trouble. We're both better than that. But I will say that back in those days, I was really good at it. Being small helps. Being quick helps even more. Combine the two, and you have the perfect recipe for a grade A petty thief. And trust me, I put those skills to good use. Problem is, the harbor was packed that day. I don't know if I've ever seen that many people in Portland, except maybe holidays. Finding my way through the crowd to reach my prize wasn't exactly easy, but it was a lot less complicated than finding a decent escape route. See, Chauncey had this rule that I agreed with completely. If anyone's ever chasing you, make sure they never find the hideout. With so many people around, I would have had plenty of witnesses. A blessing and a curse of living in prime real estate. But just as I had 100 times before, I took a deep breath, turned my head away from the display, and grabbed what I needed in one fell swoop. I regretted it immediately. "Hey!" the stand owner yelled, so loud that everyone around him stopped to stare. "You gonna pay for that this time?" I froze. Leave it to me to rob the same place twice. "Don't make me call the bots," he said firmly. I decided to chance it. Before he had a second to breathe in another command, I booked it west, the direction I always took to avoid any followers back to the hideout. Unfortunately, all the extra traffic on the pier also meant added security. I ran straight into the back of one of the police bots, his lights flashing red even without the knowledge of my crime. "Assault of a police representative is a serious offense," it raised, using the voice it always did, like someone with too much caffeine unable to stop smiling with every single one of their teeth. "Officers! That boy's a thief!" cried the stand owner, who had caught up from his place 50 yards away. Two of the bots leaned over me with their blank, faceless frames. The other one turned red too and spoke with the same chipper voice. "You've been accused of a crime by a fellow citizen. Please remain calm and do not stray from your current position, as the state of Maine places you under arrest." The way I saw it, I had two options. The easiest option was to make another break for it through the crowd. Even with their facial scanners, there were too many people to easily spot me and track me down. But I'd heard what happened in Boston with a few of the newer models, and if these bots decided I was worth the weapons, there were almost 1,000 people within accidental range. That wasn't a risk I was willing to take. That left the other way. I should mention I'm a pretty good swimmer. Very good, in fact, as I found out the hard way 2 summers earlier on a trip to Cape Cod. But that's another story. The only reason I didn't immediately take the jump was a selfish one. Wet clothes don't dry very easily when you live in a closet. Even with my hesitation, I knew having to ditch these clothes on the way was a better option than putting hundreds of people in danger. I decided to take the jump. I was right about the weapons. When I had swum upstream, far outside the range of fire, I pulled myself ashore at Spragg Point, miles from where I needed to be. So far as I could tell, the bots were far behind me, and so long as I worked my way around the city on the right path, they were never going to find me. After paying my respects to the nearby cemetery, I continued north, hoping to make it all the way to Park Avenue without detection before turning east. I think I underestimated how far of a walk it was, though, and how far I had managed to hold my breath underwater. By the time I reached my cross street, my legs felt like jelly. And I was wet, which meant that pretty soon I was freezing. Luckily, my worry didn't last long. I was a bit distracted by the giant glowing words floating 3 feet above the sidewalk when I turned, blocking my way. Now, I don't know about you, but usually that's not something I see every day. Straight in front of me, each one the size of a textbook, were 13 letters. DEWIN X RYFELWR. I know I'd been out of practice, what with the running away from home when I was 10 and skipping school for the last 2 years, but I was pretty sure those weren't real words. At least not in any language I knew. Then the strangest thing happened. It took a second, but the letters started to change. I can't exactly explain how, but it was like the language came to me, and I knew exactly what the strange words said. Wizard X Warrior. You're probably wondering why I didn't just turn around or walk around them. But ask yourself this. If you were in my shoes, what would you have done? I had enough experience to know that when your game gets interrupted by an ad, you just have to wait for the little X button to pop up before you can click it and be on your way. Luckily, there was one right in the middle. Don't ask me why I thought it worked like that, but believe me, for like 2 minutes, it absolutely did. With one finger, I clicked the center of the X, and the message disappeared. When the giant glowing letters vanished into thin air, I began to wonder if I was going crazy. Sometimes stress did some crazy things to your brain, but this was the first time anything had popped out of thin air for me. Without any evidence, I started to convince myself the whole thing had been a hallucination. But that was exactly when I heard the sirens again, and a squadron of 5 zipped around the corner. I bolted north. There's a few common sense rules when you're trying to evade capture. One of them is never back yourself into a corner. So naturally, that's what I did. I ran directly into a dead end, walls of the surrounding buildings on every side. The bots were on me before I could even think of a new plan. "Freeze!" the front man yelled, his voice having switched from polite mode to means business. "Surrender yourself to the authority of the local police." My tongue was faster than my brain. "No, thank you," I replied. "I had other plans." 4 other bots joined the first one at the exit from the alley. In unison, they repeated the command even louder than before. "Think, Eric, think." "You guys into, sports?" I asked. "What do you guys—" "Surrender yourself to the authority of the local police." Then about halfway down the alley, the air began to shimmer. Feeling my jaw drop, I watched as a white shape started to materialize out of nothingness. It wasn't like the letters, which had just come and gone in the blink of an eye. This time it took a few seconds. But when the light vanished, there was a boy standing on the concrete who hadn't been there before. "What?" my voice squeaked. "Surrender yourself to—" The boy spun around and whipped his arms in the direction of the bots. He shouted something that sounded like, "fruity draw." I didn't need to wait for the words to translate the way the letters had. There was enough evidence to show for his command. Explode. A flash of light shot from the end of his arm and hit the ground right in front of the lead police spot. The pavement erupted in a mushroom cloud of force, the sound loud enough to wake the neighborhood. When the gray smoke cleared, all 5 bots were melted into piles of scrap metal along the sides of the building. The boy turned to me, whispering another word into his hand, and suddenly the alley lit up with another bright light from the tips of his fingers. "Dude!" I raised, blinded by the light. I still wasn't over the floating billboard, or the fact that he had just appeared out of nowhere, or the fact that he had just blown up the sidewalk. He walked toward me, but just like before, I had nowhere to go. When he was 3 feet away, he lowered his hand, and I could finally see his face. He was at most the same age as Chauncey, with the slightest hint of a mustache only showing on his chestnut skin because of the light. He was much taller than me, but held himself in a way that was hardly threatening, even after what he just accomplished. His curly brown hair was neatly trimmed into a flat top. "Dude," he mimicked, his voice surprisingly low. "You just—" I started, but the look in his golden brown eyes read, "I know." I turned my attention to the blinding light at his chest. My eyes had adjusted somewhat, and I could finally see past it to the device in his hand. "Is that a stick?" "Parle," he whispered, and the light turned a soft yellow, making everything way easier to see. "Actually, it's a wand." "You—" I started. "You have a magic wand?" "Of course I have a magic wand," he replied casually. "You think I could do that without one?" I tried, suddenly frightened again. "What do you want with me?" The boy shrugged. "I'm here to take you." I'd been afraid of that. "What?" I questioned. "Where?" He continued shrugging, like his answer was obvious. "Logies." I didn't know which question to ask first, even if he gave me time for any of them. "Why?" I managed. The question caught him off guard. "What do you mean, why?" he asked. "You're 12, right?" Even without parents, I'd been taught that it was a bad idea to tell strangers too much information. "Yes?" I failed. "Eric Schwabington?" He gestured. "Yes?" I failed again. "Perfect," he smiled. "Then I came to the right place. I'm Jordan Vanson. I'm part of the recovery team." I backed into the wall as far as I could. "Recovery team for what?" If I was a character in a sitcom, Jordan would have turned directly to the camera. "Logies," he repeated. Obviously. Obviously, I agreed, scared and confused. What's Logeets? His eyebrows shot together, perplexed by my question. What do you mean, what's Logeets? It's a school. I shook my head. I don't want to go to school. Well, then why'd you sign the thing? What thing? At this point, I think both of us were so confused we forgot to pay any attention to anything else. Clearly, the explosion had raised some alarms. Sirens were closing in from the distance. Jordan backed off, trying to look as unthreatening as possible. The consent form, he hollered. The invitation. Dude, what are you talking about? Then the kid with the magic wand did the absolute last thing I could have expected. He pulled out his phone. I have it right here, he read. A few minutes ago, you were given the traditional question, wizard or warrior. You chose and. I chose... What do you mean I chose and? That wasn't even... I started piecing together the floating letters. How can you choose and? Jordan raised his hands. Well, you press the X, he explained. X means or, and, depending on the context. I was so confused I tried not to think about it. I thought it meant exit, I reasoned. As in, I wanted it to go away so I could keep walking. Jordan's face turned white. Oh, he said softly. Yeah, that's not what the X does. I'm getting that now! He pressed his wand up to his temple and started scratching his head. Well, it's a magically binding contract, Jordan sighed. Whether you meant to or not, you agreed to the terms and conditions. Maybe Jones can help us sort this out. The sirens were on our street now. Who's Jones? It doesn't matter who Jones is. Are you coming with me or not? Am I... My brain was still trailing way too far behind. Where? Up there. Jordan pointed to nothing in particular, only the darkening sky. What? I questioned. How? Jordan held up his phone. Same way I got down. That... I did it again. Why would I do that? He shoved his wand into a holster on his waist. Because your other option is that. Sure enough, an entire fleet of police bots had rounded the corner. Even without faces, they looked a lot angrier than the last group. Jordan was right. I was out of options. I had nothing to lose. I turned to him and nodded. I've never personally stood on a stage before, but I was familiar with the term lost in the lights. Whatever Jordan did to get us out of the alley felt a lot like that. A spotlight shone down on us with the intensity of thousands, and for a few seconds I thought I was burning alive. Then the light cleared, and coldness overwhelmed my skin. We were standing on a black floor, surrounded by walls of gray and white. Everything was either metal or glass. It took a few more seconds for my breathing to catch up with my body. I turned around in a circle, desperate to find a view of Portland. For a moment I thought I was dead. Come on, Jordan instructed, pulling me with him to the chamber door. It split in half diagonally, shooting apart like scissors and leading to a metal hallway. Wait, I gasped, trying to keep up. Where are we? Jordan was already 20 feet ahead of me. Come on, he repeated. I'll show you. 30 feet more and he stopped. We're about 500 miles above where we just were. 500 miles, my brain echoed. Above. But that... Oh yeah, he grinned, swiping his hand down the wall to my left. We're in space. The wall pulled back like a garage door, revealing an enormous window looking out into nothing but blackness and stars. Welcome to the IS Carnarvon.